window. And so it doesn't matter whether he wins a general or not. That's not the point. So one of the mistakes I see on our side is if someone like him who's like super radical loses, they celebrate. They go, oh yeah, see, we won and thank God and all those kind of things. It doesn't matter. The fact that he's won the primary, if he loses the general election, someone like him and more radical than him will win the general the next time, because they're going to train your children to vote for him. So yeah, maybe they don't get it in Michigan or Nebraska or wherever they're doing these really radical people, but the 8th grader today, the 10th grader or the 8th grader today, the 7th grader today will vote for the next one. That's the bellwether. That's the crystal ball.
Well, what you're saying is very profound in terms of the long game, and that ultimately is the most important thing fundamentally. But the short game is really important too, because we're talking about the balance of Congress. So in these elections, do you chalk any of it to candidate personality? As these particular candidates, like Mamdani here in NYC, they're strong orators, and to be honest, in some instances, they seem much more relatable to the younger generation than were their opponents, particularly in this case in Michigan. So does candidate strength play into this?
It's not about candidate strength, it's candidate familiarity. If you tell children since kindergarten about marginalized people, and by the time middle school they know the words oppression and racism and all these different things, and white man bad, straight white man bad, America's oppressive, it's built on slaves, and those kind of things, when they hear from a candidate, it's not that the candidate is so charming or viable, but because they've been drinking that for 13 years, when a candidate talks the way they've been hearing, it's familiarity, it's relatability, exactly what you said. So it doesn't matter what they are in reality. All it matters is that their voting bloc, what they've heard in school, in college, a lot of people who vote for people like him are these insufferable woke white women. They've heard it in college. They got a ton of white guilt. So that's where the relatability comes in, is because they've been drilled in that at a very early age. And then if you go to college, they get it in college even more, which is why the people who go to college are more socialist and more communist than the people people 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Well, you've just revealed something that I've been hearing in all these interviews I've been doing. Everybody's saying that it's the educated that are actually going for these progressive candidates, and those who don't have those advanced degrees are actually, voting more centrist or to the right. And you've just revealed why that is. And I want to talk about those older voters, because they might not even recognize
they have
a JFK or Bill
connection with
Democratic
God,
Party.
perhaps.
So what's happened to openly espouse socialist and communist ideas within the Democratic Party? How has it changed so much?
Well, I don't think the Democratic Party has changed. They've been more emboldened. They've always been who they are. It's just that they couldn't, when Bill Clinton was in the 90s, they couldn't come out and sound like Mamdani. There's no way they wouldn't go anywhere. And that's the thing about communism. When people like you and I, my friend, when our feet hits the ground, we think about our business, how we can help our friends, family, and just our little world. But when a communist foot hits the ground, they're all about infringing on your freedom and how they can move their mission, which is communism in America. And so taking over the Democratic Party wasn't very difficult because they're already leaning that way. The only thing that was working against them was time and scalability.
They've been communist for
and so time
years.
This is the 100-year march. Anybody who understands communism, they already laid down the law 80, 100 years ago. It was a 100-year march. And so that they're almost there. They're about 80 years into that. And then scalability was that they couldn't get to that rural area, that red area. They couldn't get to those churches and the Christians and all those things. And they found it with education, with the schools. We call it education. It's just the government K-12 schools and colleges. So that was their missing piece. That was the missing puzzle, that they couldn't scale it.
Yeah, it takes
And
a village to raise a child.
Train the school counselors and teachers to bring it into the K-12. That was their missing piece, which is why a lot of people feel like, how come it feels like it's all of a sudden over the last 10, 12 years or so? It's not that it's all of a sudden, it's just that they were building for so long, and now they're able to scale it in government K through 12 and in colleges and things. And so, yeah, you're right. It's when you say educated, it depends on what you're saying. Educated how? You know, it's not the education that you and I are talking about.
Well, you articulate it in such an easily understandable way. A very illuminating discussion. Alvin Louis, President Courage is a Habit. Thank you so much for joining this evening.
Won the Democratic primary. What is your reaction to that result?
I think it's pathetic. I don't know. I'm from Michigan. I grew up in Michigan, and it's changed a lot there. And I think it's naive on the part of the people whoever's voting for these folks because, you know, we just don't get stuff for free. Somebody's got to pay for it.
Not happy about it. I don't like it at all. I think we were meant to be a free country. I think it's wanting someone else to like pave the way for you instead of working for it yourself.
Everybody's seems to be just like misleading the people, like open promises. Nothing really happens. I think it really has a lot to do with like controlling the media, telling everybody what they want to hear, but like not really pulling through.
We need to get rid of the socialism. That's a crock. Let's work together. We're a democracy.
I've lived in countries that were under socialism for years. I know what that's about. I know how that ends up. And so I want nothing to do with it. I hope that guy gets defeated in the general election in November.
What is your warning to your fellow Americans about communism and socialism?
It's coming if we let it. They predicted 50 years ago that our country would start to implode, and it's happening. And that was from KGB officers.
A lot of these institutions got us here where we are today, brought us all this way. Abolishing that is like trying to pull out the roots for our country.
And you see what other countries that have done that before, and it's just, you know, ends up in poverty and such. I lived in Tanzania, East Africa, which was a heavily socialist nation. And I lived in Zimbabwe, which was a socialist, almost communist nation under Robert Mugabe. You got 1% or less that have, they're extremely wealthy. 99% are extremely poor and have no rights whatsoever. It's a racist system, it's a classist system, and it does not work.
And a hidden China threat inside everyday routers. Cybersecurity researchers say they found a hidden backdoor in more than 20 million models of Chinese-made internet routers sold worldwide. They warn it could let attackers take control of the router and potentially access other devices which are connected to that same network. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on that.
Yep.
Cybersecurity firm Volncheck released a report Wednesday saying the backdoor is built into routers sold under the ZBT Link and Wi-Flyer brand names. It estimates more than 100,000 of the devices have been deployed worldwide, but it's not clear how many are being used in the U.S. Researchers at the firm say the routers automatically connect to a Chinese-registered internet domain every 35 seconds. If someone controls that connection, they could take over the router and gain access to other devices on that same network. Experts note that many home users and small businesses would have no idea the backdoor exists. The discovery comes as the U.S. and European Union continue to warn that Chinese-made router equipment could pose cybersecurity risks. Federal regulators have already moved to restrict imports of some foreign-made routers over national security concerns. Meanwhile, Beijing has repeatedly denied involvement in cyber espionage or cyber attacks.
At least 17 civilians are reported dead in Ukraine today after a Russian ballistic missile attack. Moscow already commenting on its strikes on Ukraine's capital city. NTD's international
Nobody's
correspondent
complaining
Aaron
about
Hasler
Russia.
has a war update.
Destruction is seen in and around Kiev on Wednesday. Ukrainian officials say Russia launched a massive ballistic missile barrage, killing at least 17 civilians. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the main targets were infrastructure, warehouses, and a railway station. Russia says it struck 7 logistics centers, accusing them of being used to store drone components. According to Zelensky, so far this year, Ukraine has only received a third of the anti-ballistic missile systems it had received at the same time last year, saying it is very important that our partners understand that delays in supplying them lead directly to such horrific casualties and destruction. The Ukrainian president says Russia is planning more such attacks.
And we have our estimation I want to share with you. They will increase the production of such ballistic missiles.
Zelensky made the remarks during a meeting with the new defense minister of the UK. Meanwhile, in Washington, Secretary of State Marco Rubio meeting with the new foreign minister of the UK. Rubio says, quote, "We discussed the need for Europe to take a greater role in its own security." The secretary also told reporters before the meeting that Ukraine would be on the agenda as well, although it's not yet clear what exactly the two discussed. Wednesday's attacks on Kiev come after weeks of Ukraine attacking warehouses belonging to Russia's largest online retailer called Wildberries. Kiev launched another such attack on Wednesday. Footage shows the aftermath of the strike, with the building completely on fire. Ukraine says the site stores Russian military equipment, which Moscow denies. Wildberries makes up a significant part of Russia's GDP, and the company already asked Russian state-owned banks for financial support after the Ukrainian attacks. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Coming up in tennis, world number 2